The big thing that's obvious when I look at the originals is we had quite a gap, because we didn't, when we made the cases, we hadn't perfected the dials. So we had to leave some leeway for fitting. And so you can see this gap between the bezel and the dial, which isn't there on later models.
And then you can sort of see in the later models that we have more coverage at the edges of the dial.
It's all about bringing light to the dial and not covering any of it up. I think 2015 we started working on a case to put the dial in. From the beginning, the project was about making a dial. It was the enamelling that was the harder thing to work out. And because to start with, we didn't have any information on thicknesses or anything like that, you couldn't really create a case to house them. So the first few years we were just making these to try and get them to the right tolerances. And so the case came along a couple of years after we started anOrdain. The model was really about just housing the enamel dial, and I think all subsequent watches they've been more concept driven in terms of there's an idea behind them. But with the Model 1, it was about the dial.
The Model 1 was our first outing with enamel, yes, but we didn't really understand what the limitations were of the material, and now we know that there's a huge amount of rejection that is standard in the industry for these pieces, and also there's a lot of sort of issues with tolerance because the expansion and contraction, because each of the colours is made up of a different material structure, and so they behave so differently. So creating a case and a set of hands that work across all 6 different colours was quite a challenge.
When we designed the dial for this, Imogen treated the hands like they were numerals. The letters, the numbers, and the hands were all seen as a set. And when we began, Imogen was founding part of the team, and so the dial design was really done from a typographer's perspective rather than a watch enthusiast or watch industry perspective. This is one detail I remember, which is carried all the way through, is that when Imogen, a typographer, was designing the logo, there's a little kind of cutaway in it, and that's been replicated here, where
in the join between the lugs and the case. Yeah, I think that was one of the sort of key parts. It's actually on the Model 2 case as well. Mm-hmm. I think it was nice to have a connection between the typography and the sort of, I guess, the steel details as well.
The way that we make enamel dials is very old-fashioned, because we were learning in a bubble. We didn't have, there was no kind of teaching or books or anything to learn from. And at the time, we were making one watch a week. I think if we'd made one in a week, it was a good week. And there were 3 enamelers at the time, watchmaker, and then 2 or 3 other people. It was very, very slow production. We'd got to the stage where we could make an enamel dial, but we were not at all efficient about it.
You think you've got rid of everything, you'll do the final fire, you get this beautiful finish, and then there's just one little fleck of oxide is moved or come up in the kiln and land on the dial, and there's the one that you have that mental tick or gratification that was the first one that you put in the tray or finished. So I think I had my first successes consistently with the blue, so it's one that I have maybe a bit of a soft spot for personally. I had an early one there. There was one that there's a really early one. It's a really early white. You can tell by the print that's on it. It's possibly when we were using a hand, or Adam was testing out with a hand printer. So that's many years old. You asked how many hours. I don't know how many hours. Don't want to think how many hours of time are in here, but so this is our opaque box of shame. So any dial that can have something go wrong from early stages or building up when you're working on a dial to dials that have gone through full feet being attached. But then things like this Paris Blue, which you can see would have been ground to prepared for its final fire, and then there's just been a pit bubble hiding underneath that's then become very apparent. In the very first colour options were Iron Cream, which was our most popular opaque then and still is our most popular opaque colour. Then we did a pink, and it's really nice soft pastel pink, which we've since discontinued. It was now the Ox Blood, but the Ox Blood Red, which then was a Post Office Red, so slightly different shade, but very similar. And then we had the Transparent Blue, which was actually, as it said, a transparent, but on the copper it gave it this really nice deep rich blue, which then kind of gave it a different feel to the other blue that we had, which is a Hebridean blue, so much more of a sky blue, kind of in that same kind of soft pastel palette that the pink was. Then the black. Black was our last option of the 6. Some have remained and others have remained but developed a little, changed what enamel we used. So back then it was Lewis bought us a little tent and essentially like a car repainting spray gun. Because it was so fine, such like a fine dust, and I had obviously have had a beard then as I do now. The kind of face respirator wasn't the best fit, so I ended up getting what's called a PARP, which is a powered respirator. So I have like a backpack and a face mask that blows air through to keep my lungs safe. That nature, the any sort of bubble dip thing just was like looked like a starry night, it was. So we tried at the time as well, because we were sifting it on. You've got different grain sizes, so the black proved the most difficult dial to make at the beginning. The starry night thing I was talking about on this one. And eventually, after I don't know how many tens, if not hundreds of dials I sprayed, we got one for the order, and then once we got that, we took it off the off the website. We said it wasn't available. It was probably the limit of our abilities then. I think now a black enamel we would find a way. We have more knowledge and skill that I think black would definitely be possible in an enamel. It was the beginning of us understanding that different enamels needed to be treated different ways.
The name anOrdain was chosen partly because it's memorable. I thought it was memorable, and partly because it had nothing attached to it. No one had any or really any associations. And equally, the watch, the Model 1, it wasn't a sort of naming system people were using back then. So, watches might be named after a rally or an explorer or a ship or something. But this was just trying to be as sort of clinical as possible, so that when you came to the watch, the information you took from it really came from the watch itself.
I was going to say, you don't have any reference for the anOrdain name unless you're Gaelic and from the...
I can actually pronounce it properly.
What does it mean again?
Well, that's interesting, because we had a guy in the other weekend who was a gamekeeper from Leadmore, which is not far at all from anOrdain, and he was a native speaker, and he said that it meant of the small hammer, which I loved. I remember we'd officially launched in sort of summer, so June, July, and we got an Instagram account, and lots of people liked us and stuff. We hadn't sold anything, and I was, starting to panic a bit. And then by September, one night there was my phone made these noises and kept waking me up. I didn't know what it was. So in the morning I looked at it, and it was the Shopify app, and we'd started selling things, which was really odd, because it was a couple of months after we launched. And what happened is we had a review of the watches by the Singaporean publication SJX, and we'd had, over that first weekend, we had 24 orders.
We had time to sort of catch up with ourselves.
Yeah, and
also,
the customers were really, really understanding. And I think because they understood the craft to an extent that and no one wants a rushed watch, you know.
And also, when we were talking about hitting 100 for the Model 1, while we were doing that, we were also developing the Model 2. You know, it's like they kind of run in parallel a lot of the time and overlap. And so we didn't release the Model 2 too long after moving into the new building.
As I said, I still enjoy making a Model 1 8 years on from when I made my first one, because we've honed the skill and refined it. And you know, if I was still banging my head against the wall, sifting with one hand and doing all these crazy little jangly things that we used to do back then, I maybe answer the question differently. But no, everything we've done, we've learned from, and we've tried. It's opened the door to the next idea, and it's opened the door to us being in here.